I think what you're hearing from Trump and those around Trump is the exact opposite. We don't want anyone who doesn't agree with Trump this time round. Those were the people that screwed things up last time. It is on him now. There is no one stopping him. There's no accident. There are going to be no people that are part of his inner circle that don't want to just back him to the hilt.
President-elect Trump's new cabinet is starting to take shape.
President-elect Trump says Tom Homan, his former director of immigration enforcement, will serve as the White House border czar.
Expect deportation to be top of mind for this incoming border czar.
There's breaking news tonight. The president-elect named the first member of his White House staff. Susie Wiles, his trusted campaign manager, will become his chief of staff. She'll play a big role in Trump's plans to radically transform the federal government.
Mar-a-Lago has basically been brimming for the last 2 days, I'm told. Multiple sources tell me tonight that Musk has been seen at Mar-a-Lago nearly every single day.
What does the MAGA movement look and sound like in 2024? Is it going to be more of what we saw in 2016? Or is it going to be mega MAGA, ultra MAGA? Are we going to get Trump on steroids? Today, we're going to speak to one person who Trump has backed, who thinks he's going to be in the next administration. His name is Dan Cox. He's a former Republican member of the Maryland House of Delegates. And he is what MAGA sounds like now.
And his CV fits perfectly. But there is another view in Washington, D.C. that you will hear around various embassies and think tanks, that actually it's going to be far more normal this time round, that Donald Trump is going to be a slightly softer version of the previous one, and that he has got his legacy to think about. Do we honestly believe that? Welcome to the News Agents. It's John.
It's Emily.
And over the past few days, we've seen who's in and who's out of the new Trump administration, and no big surprises, because the people that are out are the leftovers from the last regime who didn't always see eye to eye with Donald Trump. So Nikki Haley, no job for you. Mike Pompeo, former Secretary of State and CIA Director, no job for you either. But Elise Stefanik, who was a New York Congresswoman who was firmly MAGA, well, she's going to be Trump's UN ambassador. So you're starting to see the shape. And there seems to be a premium on loyalty. Are you loyal to Donald Trump? If you tick that box, then happy days.
Yeah, and last time round in 2016, you'll remember all the focus was on Trump Tower in New York, where we could actually see the coming and going of who was getting out the cars, and the press was there.
The
and
beauty parade.
The beauty parade sort of in and out. This time, the beauty parade is rather more wrapped up under the pink stone of Mar-a-Lago. It's a private club. It's much harder to see exactly who's coming into the frame and who isn't. But we are getting a sense now of who is vying for those jobs. And one of the people is Dan Cox. Now, Dan Cox is a father of 10 and indeed a child of 10 who has been backed by Donald Trump in the past.
A lot of Cox.
I'm not sure you're allowed to get away with that.
I think it's quite a good joke.
He stood in the Maryland gubernatorial election, which actually he lost in a landslide in 2022, even though he was backed by Trump. So he's the kind of person that has had the endorsement of the president-elect in the past and thinks he might be back in the administration this time round. And his views fit a fairly standard MAGA profile in terms of where he is on abortion, where he is on the far right, where he is on the Proud Boys, where he is on Trump's Stop the Steal narrative stroke lie. And we're going to speak to him at some length to give you a sense of what that voice now sounds like. Well, joining us now, I'm pleased to say, is Dan Cox, who was the Republican member of the Maryland House of Delegates until 2023 and then stood for the governorship in 2022. He's been heavily backed by Donald Trump. Do you think there is a job for you, Dan, in this new administration?
Oh, very, very possibly. I've had some calls about the possibilities of what my role might be if I had my name in the hat, which I did offer that. So we will see. It's obviously the president's prerogative, and it would be an honor to serve him in whatever capacity that he thinks is best. I have served as an attorney for 20 years. I think I could bring a lot to help the president, and obviously would cheer him on and serve the people of the United States with everything I have.
So I think it's fair to describe you politically as MAGA or ultra MAGA or mega MAGA. I don't know which is the best one. Do you think that the administration that Donald Trump is going to build is going to be much more ultra MAGA than it was in 2017?
You know, I love the MAGA movement in that sense, but I'm averse to adopting labels because I am all about America. And, you know, that whole label, I think President Trump says it well, is make America great again. And the intent and purpose of that is that when America is strong economically, socially, morally, and politically, when we have the ability to support our allies and to work across the world, it raises everyone up. It's like the lifting tide raising all boats. And so there's a real need for that, and it's exciting to be part of it and to see it happen again. Honestly, a lot of us in the trenches, so to speak, we're hoping for this moment, but it's truly beyond our wildest dreams to not only win the presidency again, but to have such a wide victory that is across all boards. It looks like we're going to have an incredible victory in the House. We've already taken the Senate. So the opportunity to implement the policies are there. So to directly answer your question about MAGA, so to speak, the Make America Great Again policy movement is simply common sense. Honestly, it's about securing our borders. It's about making sure we have checks and making sure that our justice system works for the people and is not weaponized. And we have one of the greatest opportunities in the world to bring economic opportunity to all nations. But if our dollar falters and if our economy burns out, it's going to be negative for a lot of people, and we don't want to see that. And I think that we can make that change.
You thought that the election was stolen in 2020. You organised buses to go to Save the America March in Washington on January the 6th. You tweeted that Pence is a traitor. You expressed support for, I think, Enrique Tarrio, the leader of the Proud Boys. I mean, tell me if I've got any of this wrong. You've also opposed the shutdown during COVID-19. You reject the consensus on climate change.
So yeah, that's a lot to go over quickly, but let me deal with some of it quickly. I did not organize buses. That's a false statement in the press. I made that clear. Maryland Matters corrected that, but it still got carried with national media. I simply took 8 of our family, 6 of our kids. We have a big family, and we were invited to hear the president speak on the Mall. And so I bought tickets for my children and we had a beautiful time over on the Mall by the White House.
Did you send a tweet saying that Pence is a traitor?
And that's as to the next thing. I did indicate on my tweet that was not appropriate of me to have said that, because I think that although the idea was that he had changed his mind and changed his word, that's the problem that everybody understands in America. The vice president had issued a legal statement that he was going to ensure election integrity with the electors, and that was his role as the vice president. And so, not to rehash all of that, but I did denounce the fact that I overstated that, and it did.
And the Proud Boys?
I don't know what that was about. I think it was maybe a like or something. I was concerned about something going on with the arrests. And honestly, there is a concern that exists in this country at this very moment. The J6, I don't know these people, but I can attest as an attorney who defends people in criminal court. Due process is the Western ideology that must be embraced all the way back to my enjoyment of walking the fields of Runnymede.
And there was due process, wasn't there? There was a trial, and these people were convicted.
No, they're sitting there in jail right now with no trials, many of them. And it's been, 3 years?
But many have had trials and been convicted.
Some of them have had trials, but there's
And you blamed Antifa for the attack on the Capitol. So you're saying it wasn't really Trump supporters, it wasn't the Proud Boys, it wasn't the Oath Keepers, it was anti-fascists who had sort of stirred it up.
No, I did speculate at the time. There was some information that we had that these were not people that were with the Trump movement, and they were in black masks. Our people don't wear black masks. We wear red hats that says "Make America Great Again." So at the time, I was speculating that I wonder if this might be Antifa. As you recall, just months before, Antifa had burned one of our oldest Anglican Episcopal churches right across from the White House, tried to burn it down. And so there were riots in the streets just recently before that. So that was a concern. It was certainly speculation.
Dan, just looking forward now, Trump has had a far-reaching victory, and nobody is questioning the legitimacy of that win. In terms of the policies going forward, you would support him, I think, freeing what he calls the January the 6th hostages. In other words, the people that were part of that insurrection. Would you support his pardoning of them?
I absolutely would. And I'll tell you, one lady is a 76-year-old grandmother, never been in trouble in her life. I don't even think she had a speeding ticket. My understanding of the case is she was invited to walk into the Capitol. And when the Capitol Police open the doors and invite people to walk through, a grandmother doesn't have reason to believe that she's not invited in. And yet she's in jail right now for 3 years or more. And I think that's a travesty of justice.
And would you like to see, are you excited about Trump's policy to deport 11 million migrants?
I think any criminal illegal alien should be deported. And one of the things that is discussed regularly in the media here is, does that include children? And I think that children who are part of a family that have come across the border illegally need to understand that there's a way to legally do it. I mean, there is a procedure for that. You don't just get to walk in with your family. And so much as the law provides for the deportation, I think it'll be done lawfully, and I think that it will also save lives.
So that's deportation of migrants. He's also got strong views on the Department of Justice. I think he sort of threatened Jack Smith. What would you like to see happen to the Department of Justice now?
Well, I think the threat with Jack Smith is that the Supreme Court has made it clear he was unconstitutionally appointed. He's not in any way a legitimate person. And I think that Jack Smith needs to probably be investigated himself for what he's done. He's weaponized the Justice Department.
So Jack Smith should be investigated, and Joe Biden? I mean, how far would you take that investigation?
Well, I'm not saying, and I'm not referring to the president. I'm talking about the weaponization of DOJ. And I can assure you that on the inside, from my knowledge of the inside of the DOJ, there are what's called line prosecutors, career prosecutors that have been there for many administrations. These are not political folks, and they've been horrified and disgusted at what's going on to the point where they've resigned. And that's sad, because we need good prosecutors to be able to uphold our laws. And so I think reestablishing law and order in the Department of Justice is essential.
The first Trump administration had the so-called grown-ups, the Jim Mattises, John Kelly, H.R. McMaster, you name it. This time round, do you think it is going to be different? Because there were an awful lot of people acting as a brake on Donald Trump's instincts the first time round.
Well, I would say to say that it's acting as a brake on his instincts is a little bit partisan in the sense of respectfully, because in this sense, President Trump is what I think we in the West and in the UK desire: someone who actually cares enough to set aside billions of dollars and castles and beaches and say, let's do something better to help everybody. That's the intent here. And so when you have people in the cabinet headbutting and saying, no, this is not something that we support because, by the way, we're making money on the side, or we know individuals, our friends are making money on the side. And, this kind of corruption needs to end. And so I would support the president making sure the cabinet is very clean, not corrupt in any way, and focuses on rebuilding the greatness of this country and the honesty in our process. And I think that's going to benefit everybody.
Dan, thank you so much. Great to speak to you, Dan Cox. We hope to stay in touch with you. And let us know. Tell us if he gives you a job in the administration.
So interesting that the pitch there at the end is, Donald Trump this time round, he's got to have truthful, honest people, unlike the corrupt Jim Mattis, the corrupt John Kelly. I don't think that's quite a fair reflection of them. They might have disagreed with Donald Trump. It doesn't make them corrupt for having disagreed.
This is about tribes now. Make no mistake. You know, what you often hear is people who have won saying, I'm going to reach across the political divide and it's going to be a government of all the colours and all the flavours. And make no mistake, this is for all America, not just, you know, for partisan America. I think what you're hearing from Trump and those around Trump is the exact opposite. We don't want anyone who doesn't agree with Trump this time round. Those were the people that screwed things up last time. We want people who reflect Trump's own interests. We know that there is, you know, a narcissistic temperament right in the centre of the president-elect, and he wants to see that reflected in those around him. And I think they're not even pretending it is going to cross divides. They're not even pretending it's going to reach out. They are, in some sense, the sort of angriest winners you've ever seen, because they want the win to be complete, right?
So I was struck by a complete counter-argument that I was presented with before I left Washington on Saturday night, which is from some pretty well-connected people saying completely the opposite. That Donald Trump this time round will be much more conscious about his legacy. He knows he's only got 4 years left. It's going to be a slightly softer Donald Trump, that the language he used at the convention about wanting to unite the American people is real. And yes, he's going to have people who are purely MAGA in the administration, but they are going to want to get things done. It's going to be more professional. It's not going to be the chaos that we saw when he came to power in January 2017. And it's going to be an altogether different sort of administration, and that you will be surprised by it. Now, that's the argument. I mean, I'm going to say that on the appointments we've seen so far, and him making very clear that there's no room for a Nikki Haley or a Mike Pompeo to come back in the administration, that I think you have to be a believer to have a job.
Of course. And I think the difference this time round is that there are no surprises. This team went out to win, believed it would win, and has won comprehensively. There is no question about the legitimacy of the victory. And I think the mistake you make is to think that anything will be ad hoc now, that this has been 4 years in the making, you know, laying the groundwork, getting people on side, sending out what I call the PTA mums, you know, to actually spread the word in every single precinct, in every single county, in every single state. That has been part of the groundwork for what they now do. And so in a way, it is on him now. There is no one stopping him. There's no accident. There are going to be no people that are part of his inner circle that don't want to just back him to the hilt. They don't think they need guardrails because they think the guardrails are what screwed things up last time round. And so there is something very clean about this, which is it's either going to be the most, you know, extraordinary success, you know, MAGA terms ever, or else it's going to go up in flames when he still starts arguing and firing and having bust-ups with those who are now closest to him.
I think your phrase there, it's on him, is absolutely on the money, because this time round he says that he is going to get manufacturing jobs flooding back into the US. It's on him. Is he going to get everything going again? Questionable. Is he going to be able to deport millions of undocumented migrants? Again, it's on him. And if he doesn't do it, then there's going to be a lot of disappointment around.
Or he just says he's done it. Well, I mean, that's the flip side. You can deport 2 busloads and then spin that you've deported millions. And actually,
but if people are still pouring across the border, then that is going to be noticed. So he's set himself a bar that is very high to get the American economy growing again. He said this beautiful word, tariffs. But tariffs are very inflationary and will push up the cost of goods for a lot of Americans who are struggling at the moment. So, you know, the proof is in the pudding, but it's on him is unique this time round compared to last time.
And Dan Cox, who you just heard from, we don't yet know if he's going to get a job in the administration. Interesting to watch. And we don't know what Dan's job is going to be or if he's going to have a job in the administration. But we do know that he was backed by Trump, that he has been one of the foot soldiers.
His CV fits.
The CV fits. And he's a lawyer. You know, he wants to be part of the Department of Justice. He thinks that Jack Smith should be investigated. And this is where we are now. He thinks that, you know, many of the January the 6th convictions probably were unfair or should be reopened or overturned. And it is a whole new world. This is what MAGA 24 will look and sound like.
Well, in a moment, we're going to consider what should be picked out of the ruins for the Democratic Party. We'll be back in a moment. So if you're a Democrat, it is a pretty gloomy post-mortem where if you look in the storeroom for silver linings, you're going to find it's pretty empty because there's not much to take away where you thought, well, it wasn't so bad here. It was bad everywhere. City, rural areas, red states, blue states, you name it, the Democrats took one hell of a beating last Tuesday night. And the post-mortem is focusing on the campaign, sure, but about wider issues too, about how do you be a progressive in America and win an argument so that what you're saying resonates with voters. And I think that is at the heart of it. And we're joined now by Luke Tryl from More in Common. Luke, I've just read a really long, interesting thread that you've written about the problem that they had. Were you arguing that it wasn't so much policy, it was the way they framed the policy?
Yeah, absolutely. And there was a quote which I saw after the election, which was from a Latino prison guard who said that he had voted for Clinton in 2016, for Biden in 2020, but voted Trump in 2024 because he was just fed up that Democrats kept making him feel bad about who he was and what he did. And I think that gets at something deeper, and that was what I was trying to talk about in this thread, that progressives are really good at building a very small tent and expecting people to pass a sort of series, I guess, of purity tests to be part of that tent. And then actually, if they looked at some of their framing, some of their messaging, they would find that what they're trying to say, lots of people might agree with, but the way they've constructed the argument is actively pushing people away.
It's like that horrible phrase that you see on Twitter, which says, do better. You know, it's always kind of coming for you. Whatever you've said, it's something that you've sort of slightly got wrong, or you should have known this, but you didn't. Can I flip that on its head though, Luke, and ask you whether, if you look at the campaign, I mean, Kamala Harris notably didn't really talk about progressive issues. She hardly mentioned, whatever your epitome of progressive issues is, the trans issue or the pronoun issue or anything like that. But this was something that was thrust upon her by the way that Trump and the MAGA crowd campaigned. It was they were talking up the wedge issues, not the Democrats.
And look, I think a lot of people say it's terribly unfair given she ran on a kind of mainstream message. I would say two things to that, which I think were barriers and difficulties for her. One was some of her own record was leaning into some of these things, and we saw in the final days, regardless of what you think about it, Trump running that ad, which is "I'm for you, she's for they, them," splicing in some of her clips. And again, regardless of what you think about the issue, clearly it was effective with some voters. But I think the second thing is, I think there is a burden on progressive candidates, less so than campaigners, to go that step further than just not talking about some of those issues which become wedges, and to actively distance themselves from it. Because what was clear in the US was you had a lot of voters who basically bought into this idea that Kamala Harris really was a San Francisco liberal who believed in lots of these issues which weren't that popular in some parts of America. I don't think she perhaps did enough quite to distance herself from it. But it was hard, right? She had 100 days, and if she had had longer, she might have been able to do more.
So what is it about defund the police in the wake of Black Lives Matter? I would have thought a guaranteed way to alienate support. And I would there's a coffee shop I used to go to in Georgetown in Washington, and there were 3 or 4 people serving who were wearing defund the police T-shirts. And you're just thinking, if that kind of becomes part of a generalized thing, who believes that we should take away funding for the police?
Absolutely that. And what you will sometimes get back from progressives is, but defund the police doesn't really mean taking away funding from the police. It means putting more money into mental health and that sort of thing. Well, say that, because the moment you're explaining what defund the police means, you're losing. The other example, and we've done some polling on this in the UK, is the phrase white privilege. So if you poll on white privilege, basically you only get the most progressive segment of the population agrees with it, finds it a helpful frame. If you ask the question, do people from ethnic minorities suffer disadvantages that white people don't, or face discrimination that white people don't? Everyone agrees. So it's almost saying almost exactly the same thing, but that subtle change of language, that frame from I'm telling you you've got privilege to other people experience discrimination that you might not, totally shifts support. And I think progressive campaigners sometimes buy into these frames, which might sound very clever and very academic, but land really badly. And you do a focus group, we did a focus group on the East Coast, and we were talking about EDI, equality, diversity, inclusion, exactly that. And someone, we talked about white privilege, and someone said, "I've never had privilege in my life. What are you telling me?" And so it just jars. And similarly, also that idea that EDI or DEI, whatever you call it, had someone else say, "It's always about other people, isn't it? It's never about me." And again, I think part of that is, and Senator Chris Murphy's got this great thread on X at the moment about this, is that what tends to get dropped from diversity discussions is class. And that actually, if you include things like class in it, actually you build a much bigger tent than just focusing on issues like race or sexuality or gender identity.
Luke, can I ask you then, suppose you're the Democratic strategist who now goes, oh my God, we're not going to talk about trans, we're not going to talk about bathrooms, we're not going to talk about DEI. I'm wondering where you draw the line on what is a wedge issue or what is, a very off-putting cultural issue and what is part of the fabric of, I guess, 2024. At what point does gay marriage become something that you think is, a step too far? At what point does IVF or abortion? All these things sound as if I'm sort of inventing stuff, but obviously, abortion has become part of that debate in the US now. So isn't there a danger that as soon as you unpick your sort of policies on this, a lot of where you want the party to be unravels?
Look, there is a risk, right? And you have to draw the line somewhere. But if I were Democrats right now in a situation where you've lost the presidency, you've lost the House, you've lost the Senate, you don't have the power to influence any of those issues at a national level. So the situation is worse. There is no doubt that on something like immigration, the situation is going to be far worse than if Kamala Harris had proposed a moderately tougher policy. It's going to be far worse than that. So I think there is something here, which is that, politics is the art of the possible. And on things like abortion, gay marriage, IVF, it's very clear you can draw a line in the sand there and build a big tent coalition to resist changes there. If you say, I only want you in that tent, if you also agree with me on this other set of 3 issues, then you lose on all of them. Yeah. Some of it is, it might sound, awful or hard-headed, but it's where can we win? And let's start there and build from there.
So your prescription for the Democrats is not that they've got to drop all this stuff. They've just got to do it differently and better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the crucial thing, which I sort of ended the thread that I was writing on this is recognize that you, by nature of being progressive campaigners, being in politics, are outliers. You're very different to most of the people that you're trying to speak to. That's understandable. You've got energy for social justice issues. You're going out and campaigning. But start by recognizing that difference. Start by looking at, okay, X is concerned about inflation. Let's start the message there and then move the conversation on to other issues as well. But if you start from thinking, well, really everyone agrees with me and they don't disagree, I think that's where you get into difficulty.
Would you put in the table of things that people don't really care about questions about, democracy and the Constitution? And, one of the things that Democrats thought would win them this was to remind people that he was lying about the last election. And that didn't shift anything, right? I mean, it's like saying to people, your votes weren't counted last time around because Donald Trump insisted that he had won them when he hadn't. But that wasn't enough. People were more motivated by inflation and the cost of goods.
Well, the interesting thing was when that first exit poll came in and it had, I think it was state of American democracy higher than the economy. I think lots of people thought, this is pointing to a Harris victory. I think underpinning that, though, it's clear, there were lots of people who took the sort of Elon Musk view of democracy being under threat and free speech. But I think there was a bit of a danger with some of the kind of fascist labeling, because it got awfully close to Hillary Clinton's deplorables, because it started being, if you back him, you're tacitly backing fascism too. And I think that's where it backfired. I don't think it's that people didn't care about January the 6th. I think, polls showed that they did, but they also didn't like being told that they were voting for an autocrat.
You see, that's so interesting, because when Emily asked the first question about, why is it that the Democrats were getting kind of pilloried for issues that they weren't talking about, the flip side of that is, there were plenty of things about QAnon, about the Proud Boys, about the Oath Keepers, about other groups that you could, perhaps tie the Republican Party to, and singularly failed to. So why is it that the Democrats get collared with trans issues and white privilege and all the rest of it, and yet the Republicans didn't get any of that backlash themselves from some of the more extreme weirdo elements in the who support Donald Trump?
I think there's a couple of things, but I think it's good. I think this stuff is always asymmetric, and sort of always has been to some degree. I do think, there are some cases where you saw basically I think the media and to some degree the public sort of became inured of some of that when it came to Trump. So it was almost sort of priced in. And I think I remember someone in 2016 was saying, when another Trump scandal broke, and they were on the Democrat campaign, they were saying, we were actually quite frustrated this other scandal broke, because it just became a series of scandals sort of drowning each other out that was sort of priced in. So I think that's part of it as well. But, I think a part of what Democrats probably have to recognize is there is an unfairness in this, and that the bar for them will always be slightly higher than it might be.
I mean, if you were Democrats now and you were sort of saying, actually, Trump did incredibly well on the Stop the Steal lie, on the eating cats and dogs in Springfield, why don't we do that now? Why don't we just lie a lot more?
Well, I think it would be a bad thing in general, but I do think it depends. Can Democrats be credible messengers on that stuff? I'm not sure that they can. I think part of it is uniquely tied to Trump. It may not even be tied to Republicans, right? Yeah. And the pattern that we saw, Trump way outrunning those swing state Senate Republican candidates. It will be interesting to see if J.D. Vance or whoever is the anointed successor can do the same things in the same way. Because what we saw with Ron DeSantis was actually he couldn't.
Didn't work.
Right?
Yeah.
He was Trump without the sort of what people see as the joyous side.
Luke, really interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you soon. Now, before we go, we have received a letter from the head teacher of St Gregory's Primary School in Sudbury in Suffolk. And it says, written the day after the election, I have to say, Dear Emily, Lewis and John, a couple of weeks ago you very kindly played and answered a voice note question that I'd sent in about the American election, where I also said that elections were like your World Cup or Olympics. You always raised your game to be on peak form. With that in mind, please accept these exclusive money can't buy gold medals that some of our younger pupils made for you during a craft session at school today. I told them they were people who were like teachers to me and who I had learned a lot from, because learning is for grown-ups too. And then out came the foil and the stickers, and off they went. We do hope you like them. Let us know. Thanks again for all your brilliant coverage, for making sense of the seemingly nonsensical, for explaining the unexpected, and for being the very best kind of teachers.
Oh, God, that
I
is
would
so
say
lovely.
enjoy a well-earned break, but I have a feeling the next 4 years in particular are going to be pretty busy now. Daniel, that is just delightful. Daniel Woodrow, there is no well-earned break, but there is. Da-da-da! Let's get on the podium.
Okay.
Yeah, you get on the podium.
Okay.
Should we open Lewis's as well?
Well, that's very
he's too
rude.
lazy to come in on a Monday.
He would say, I was really working hard on a Sunday. I'm opening my envelope now.
Da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Oh, beautiful.
Oh,
beautiful. Well done, Emily, it says on the back, with a heart. And a little picture of us.
I'm struggling to get this over my head. I don't know whether
He's too big-headed.
No,
He's too big-headed.
Well, that's not very kind, Emily. I'm sure I just think I've been shortchanged a bit on ribbon. Hang on.
Can we just say thank you to everyone at St Gregory's Primary School in Sudbury in Suffolk. Just beyond touched, and I think I wear this well.
I think I wear this well. A little tightly. It's more a choker than a medal, but I'm enjoying it. It's
like
fantastic.
A little muzzle. Yes.
Oh, bless you. Thank you so much, kids.
It has been a perfect day.
We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.